Hi, Chad.
How are
This
you,
is
Tammy?
good. So this is Chad with Marshall Septic Care. And today we're just going to do a little talk about septics, his specialty.
We love those.
Yeah. So Chad, how did you get into the business?
So I'd say about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, my family and I were working on the Navy base in Fallon, and being in construction my whole life, building homes or, pouring concrete, investing in, sewer systems in people's homes, just doing the work there. We took a job on the base, my wife and I, and there needed to be somebody else in Fallon that needed service. I mean, people just weren't getting the quality of service that they wanted, and they were calling me because I did it on the base and asking me to help them. So we decided it was a need, and our community needed it, and decided that, hey, where we can fill a need is better than just being in competition. So there wasn't really no need for competition. It was just more people moving to Fallon needed a extra set of hands, and the guys that were here in Fallon are doing the best they can to keep up, but just too much work. So we decided to join the race.
Yeah, and you're busy. You're
Yes,
really
we
busy.
have quite a bit of work.
And I heard you're going international. Just a joke.
Yeah, no, it's actually funny because we say that just because we've traveled a lot for septics, and it's kind of a joke that we have. We keep getting closer and closer to other neighboring states. So that's our little inside joke.
Hey, you got to joke in any business. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, no, we love what we do, and that's important. If you don't love what you do, then it's a job, and it's not a job to us. And all the guys that we have really enjoy what they do. It's a team thing, and that makes it fun.
Yeah. Well, I know you had fun with one of my listings in Fallon when the septic kind of collapsed. You recently redid that one too, the inspection.
Yep, that is correct. They typically will do that. We've fallen in a couple of them digging them up because of deterioration. And that's a kind of a common problem right now that the industry is actually trying to fight against, which is actually really important to talk about. I think if we're going to talk about something out of all of them, tree roots and, that kind of thing is really important. But deterioration is something that most people don't understand. And deterioration is simply put, it's where the methane gas or the hydrogen sulfide gas, which is present in septic systems, will actually deteriorate or eat or digest the minerals in the concrete, which in turn will make the concrete very soft. And the rock is the strength in concrete. And that's from my concrete experience. Rebar is, of course, the structure. The concrete rock is the strength. And in a septic tank, once the pudding, if you will, the actual slurry around the rock is softened, then there's no strength in the tank. So you'll actually find a lot of these systems that you'll dig up will have large holes in them from just basically the tank digesting under that gas. So, and maintenance is really important as well as inspections.
So how often do you recommend maintenance on a septic, pumping and all that?
We always tell people it's 3 to 5 years is our recommendation. And of course, if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house and you're using every bedroom and you have 4 or 5 people living there, 3 years is a great number. But if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house and you have 2 people living there, 5 years is probably a better number for them. So it's relative to the people that are living in the bedrooms and using the water. But I have seen typically people ask me and they say, well, it's been 15 years since I pumped it last time. Why can't I go 15 again? And I said, well, you can. That's your choice. And everyone has a choice. So they get to, invoke that right. But what typically happens is I explain to them that methane gas deterioration takes place in 5 years. A lot can take place and change, as well as tree roots. They'll actually try to grow into a tank. And so if we're looking at it, not just to service it, but to actually look inside to see what's going on with it. If we find a neighboring tree that's trying to get in through one of the pipes or coming in through one of just the seals on the tank, which they do to get water, being in Nevada, everything loves water here. What we'll find is we can deal with those roots right away versus waiting 15 years to the trees the size of the tree in the tank. So that's why we recommend 3 to 5 years.
And then there was another one I had in Stagecoach where it was really nice. They had a line of spruce trees over probably between the septic tank and the leach line.
Yes.
So, and luckily Charles had camera where he could see where the actual tree roots were in.
Yeah, and that's really, really important in inspections because you're dealing with small 4-inch diameter pipes in the soil. You can't really see in those. So typically what we'll do, like in that situation, whereas we recognize that there's a potential issue with the leach field or even a main line, just from our inspection, we'll actually recommend that camera be used. And that camera just basically gives us the ability to see all the joints in that line, so we know whether they're getting in there or they're actually coming in around the clean out pipe, which is basically the pipe that the sanitary tea comes through the wall of the tank. And they'll actually use a cushion gum or a urethane, or they'll use a sealant, or they'll use cement. The tree roots will actually get in there. And so when you see a line of trees like that, it's always a great idea to run the camera, make sure there's no issues. And then of course your flow test, your water test will determine whether water gets in there. But the neat thing about cameras is you can actually run a camera and you can water flow test at the same time. So you can verify that the water is actually percolating through the perforations in the pipe versus just shoving it in there and saying, okay, is it going away or where is it going? So that's been really, really helpful. And now for us, we're carrying multiple cameras on every truck that we do inspections with, just so that in those situations, we can always give the customer the best advice going forward in the future.
Well, it was nice because you guys are willing to teach us while we're at the inspections.
Yes.
And we can, if our clients aren't there, we can relay that onto them. And, you know, it's easier to describe.
I think anytime you start a business, you have to have a mission statement. And our mission statement is that we want to debunk all of the myths about septic systems that everyone has adopted over the years, which is you never have to pump them. The waste, if you add a product, just goes away. It never, if you add a product, it's gone. Kind of like that movie they had where you spray a little bit of this stuff on the dog poop and it disappears. That is not the case in a septic system. As a matter of fact, the more product you add, the digestion is better. But these septic systems, the most interesting part about them is they work as well as our stomach works. So what we're putting in them has a lot to do with how we're eating and digesting our own food. So if we're eating a lot of processed foods, digestion in the tank's going to be less. So by adding a product, you're actually helping digestion. But if you're adding any chemicals like bleach or household chemicals, you could be killing that. So that's one of the other things with septic systems that's really important, to make sure that you understand that by adding a product, you're not making it go away. What you're doing is you're increasing the biology to break down the actual product that's going in the tank, whether it be grease, oil, fibers, or fats, or even your proteins like hair. Hair is a protein and it takes a long time to digest. But what commonly takes place is like laundry. A lot of laundry goes into the septic systems. People don't realize their jeans are slowly emitting more and more fibers off of their pants as they're being washed. Well, all those fibers are being caught in the septic system. Those fibers are very light and they float. So without proper sanitary teas, without proper baffles and different components in the tank to help slow that transfer of liquid down, you could be getting a lot of that in your leach field and not even know it.
I didn't even know that about jeans and anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the worst you've ever seen?
Hotels or motels or even RV parks are the worst.
So that brings me into other question. So when you pump the tank, what happens with the sludge?
So by regulations that every state adopts, depending upon their commissioners, the people that write the law, people will lobby for different things depending on, like California is a lot more, they believe that the septic is a lot more dangerous than Nevada does. And that's the simple way it's put. So they don't allow certain things to take place. They want it to go through a treatment plant. Treatment plant would process the waste, screen all the material, digest it with their very, very active bugs, which are aerobic. We typically septic tanks are anaerobic, which means there's no oxygen, no air, no light. So it's a different type of bacteria, very slow and lazy. The ones at the treatment plants are much more aggressive. But we actually, we vacuum the product into the truck, and then we'd actually take it to an NDP approved farm that we are in partnership with. And this farm allows us to discharge around 100,000 gallons per acre, and we have roughly 100 acres, and it's all approved through the state, and they monitor and regulate what we dump. And we apply it to the soil, and then within 6 hours, that soil is turned over, and that product then becomes basically food for a plant. And so every year, let's just say we're going to use 2.5 acres of one section of the farm, we will apply 250,000 gallons of product to that, which is septic or grease. The grease is a little different, but we would apply that to the ground. The ground would then, with its own natural enzymes that are in the soil, which soil is a living organism, so it's really neat how that works. It digests and breaks down that food, and then the nitrates that are in the food for the plant then is given to the plant. So when we plant a seed after that total 250,000 gallons is used, we'll actually grow a crop there like corn or rye or something to that nature that pulls a lot of nitrogen out of the soil. And then we harvest that crop, and then it's fed to animals. It can't be for human consumption. So it's really actually interesting. We pump it out of the tank, apply it to the ground, and then let just the biology take place, and it just returns back to its original state. Now we do have to screen that material so that what's coming out is clean. Which that in and of itself is a whole nother process, but that's typically the gist of it.
Okay. So Mike, I have a question, and I know a lot of other people do. Can you tell me the difference between an engineered septic and a regular septic? Have you dealt with those?
So there's a couple different engineered systems. You have engineered is basically someone sits behind a desk who understands calculations and has done the research that is required to determine, let's say, soil absorption into the soil. So discharge water, which is effluent, which is basically dirty water from the house, gone through the septic, the stomach, we call it, and it's done its digestion process, and then it's discharged into this box or tank that has a pump in it typically. These type of systems, what they do is typically our water level is in the ground is 7 feet in Fallon. So if you have a septic tank that has fall from the house to the tank, and let's say it's falling 1.5 feet, so the top of the tank is 1.5 feet under the soil, by the time you discharge from the distribution box into the ground, you have a problem because it's 4 feet from the water table to the actual discharge area where the leach field would be. So that 4-foot separation allows the water to be cleaned through the rock and the soil that's underneath it, the sand here in Fallon. Typical systems will not allow for that just because they have a deep trench. So an engineered system is basically a way that we've learned to keep that 4-foot separation between the water table and the actual leach field so that you can get that effluent clean before it enters the water table. So that's one way an engineered system work in the very short, brief. The other way it could work is typical areas like Washoe Valley. You have a lot of the high water table there, which it's so high there that they have to pump up to what's called a mound system. So we've engineered this mound that basically is dirt above the ground, and we pump from a lift station up to that. And there's chambers in the ground that actually receive the waste. So that's another type. The other type could be a denitrification system, which that's another type of an engineered system, which is all of these I'm describing to you are ways that we as humans have determined a way to be cleaner with our discharge water and safer for everyone else. So that's basically what an engineered system is we want to try to treat the wastewater in our own backyard in the best way possible. And engineers have determined that based on soil type, based on water table depth of water, based on environments like, for instance, areas where it's on a hill, on the side of a hill. You can't just run your water downhill into a hole because eventually it erodes and runs down the hill. So we're engineering ways to make it better and safer for everybody. So that's really how it's described in the industry. But a traditional system, which is non-engineered, is just a gravity system. So it'd be a tank, which is the digester, a pipe from the house to the tank, and then from there to a distribution area, which is basically a hole in some pipe that runs into rock. And so that's a traditional system. I hope
Okay.
that helps a little bit.
It does, because I get confused on a lot of these and knowing where it's going to be needed. I guess that's the counties or cities that decide that, of what type.
Yeah, we have some areas like over in Dayton area, just outside of Carson there, where they're starting to require denitrification systems, and some over there in Johnson Lane, which is in Mendon area, they're requiring denitrification systems, which what that is nitrates are very dangerous to the water table because they can pollute our water in just a basic sense. So what they want to do is remove nitrates from the waste before it's discharged in the ground. So these systems are $25,000 to put them in. They're very, very intricate. They use media to capture the water and evaporate the water and store all the product, or they use aerobic digesters, which is oxygenated water, and they could use chlorine discharge into the tank to kill bacteria and to deal with nitrates. There's so many different options, and we're really, as an industry, what we did to really be ready for this is we went to a class in Indianapolis last year to basically prepare ourselves for what's coming to Nevada. California has a lot of them. And typically coming into the future in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more engineered septics. You're going to see very few traditional systems being installed. And the reason why is regulations, the amount of population. Reno's growing, Carson's growing, Dayton's growing, Silver Springs we know is going to grow. We just assume that all these areas are going to grow. So what the counties are doing is saying, hey, we need to regulate how much water is going into the ground and how. And that's where engineered comes in. They're like, okay, well, we're going to install this. So we also, as in the industry, we need to be prepared, and the realtors need to be prepared to understand, okay, what's coming, what's it going to look like, and how do I get this inspected properly? Because there's really no regulations right now for us to follow except for what we deem as important to us as a company. And so we've been certified nationally through a company that deals with coast to coast and shore to shore. So we have that certification, and it's important because we want to make sure we're maintaining that common ground where everyone's on the same page. We've learned a lot from the East Coast, so we're adopting some of that to the West Coast. So we understand, okay, these are some problems they dealt with. We are now adopting that. That's why our inspections aren't as vague as they used to be. They're growing because we've had to grow with the industry.
Well, and Stagecoach, I believe, is another one that's going to the denitrification tanks. So if a septic system was to fail, a lot of things we talk about grandfathered. If a septic system was to fail, would they be able to put in what was there, or will they have to put in denitrification? And I know you probably can't answer that. It would be probably planning or building department that would.
Well, we've dealt with inspections where we've had to, let the homeowner know, or let the realtor know that was purchasing the home for their agent that the system had failed. And so we actually reached out to the county and asked them, would you issue a permit for these areas in Stagecoach? And they said, no, not without a plan, an engineered plan for a denitrification system. So they are not going to require, in certain areas of Stagecoach, they're not going to allow you to just put in the old traditional gravity system or repair an area. They will not give a permit unless it's a denitrification. And buying a house, it's really important to make sure that septic is inspected properly, because if you're in one of those areas and it fails, you have a $25,000 bill coming that you had no idea about. And so that education is so important for our community, just to let them know, hey, when they're buying in this area, just be aware that if this changes, or if there's an issue with the septic, you will be required to upgrade to that new current mandate or policy that they have in place.
Well, and that's why I wanted to do this interview with you, because if I have these questions, there's got to be other people that have them. And, if somebody was to ask me about it, I wouldn't know how to answer. And I'm all about, educating people.
Absolutely. That's our goal too, is to educate and to just let people know, hey, it's not scary. This is where we're headed. It's just going to be the new normal. And so don't be afraid of it. Just be prepared financially to, to grab that new burden that you're going to have. But the denitrification systems, the other problem is we don't have a lot of people around here that understand them. So we have to be ready for that too. So the industry, which is, I think that Waters, I mean, they're a big company and they deal with them in Reno. So they're more familiar with them than, of course, some of the people in my area. Any rural area doesn't have anything to do with denitrification systems. So I have seen some out in Rye Patch. That's where I first ran into them for the first time. They're much older systems. And there is one that I know of in Fallon that I've had to deal with, that's a totally different type. So and all these companies have since closed their businesses that installed them 25 years ago, or 20 years ago. So that's the other problem, is now we have new standards, new companies. And so we're learning their new process. So it's a big problem, but we're slowly catching up to it. So yeah, if anybody has questions about those, they can always reach out to us too. You can always point them in our direction, give them name and number to call, and we'd be glad to talk with them about it.
And you install tanks, but you don't do perk tests or anything that you send that out, right? Or do you do it all?
We actually, we try to refer all that stuff to other companies that are more set up to do that. We are so busy with inspections and pumping and little minimal repairs, the little stuff that we typically, we don't like our customers to have let's say we go to pump a tank and there's roots in the main line and it isn't an issue with the tank. We want to be able to deal with that and not worry so much about being so busy installing that, we would be jumping out to do that. So we're just focusing on actual septic inspections, pumpings, and small repairs and cammering and things just to get our customers working. If there's a major issue, we have 4 or 5 different contractors that will just grab their information, give them to our customer and say, give these guys a call. These guys would be glad to take care of you. So at this point, we're just doing that. And
I think you've given me a list of that, or your office people have. So that has helped.
Yeah, we have a list that we can send out when we have it kind of itemized out. And if somebody's like, for instance, one of the contractors is really slow and he's got a lull in work or something, we'll typically move him up on the list so that they're not over inundated, because you'll get some people that have months and months worth of work and they can't get to the customer. We don't want that. We want them to be able to be taken care of pretty quickly. Yeah, because what are you going to do if you can't, you're going to use your tank and pump, and that's going to be a storage tank. And so we don't want people to be burdened with that cost either. Yeah, because then that causes other damage and backups. I don't know how often you see backups. Oh yeah. Well, one of the biggest things is, and on our inspections, it's something that we've kind of added to, just being more cautious and being more notable, is where in relative to there's a clean out designed to be on the outside of the homes. These clean outs have a little round cap on the top, and it's called a burst cap. What it does is when pressure builds up in the system, it pops the cap and allows the water to come out. If that clean out is above the level of the floor, it means that the toilet will leak before that clean out does. And when the toilet leaks at the very wax ring on the floor, it's going to damage the floor and it's going to flood the inside of the house with raw sewage. So we don't want that. So that's one of the things we look for too, is the condition of the cap, the type of cap that's installed. If it's the wrong one, we recommend it be changed. And then if it doesn't have a clean out, we recommend they put one in, because these are really important things moving forward in 2021 that we want to make sure we catch. Because if you have a backup in the house, or let's say a toilet runs and leaks over months, next thing you know, you have water under the toilet, and before you can shut everything off and figure out what your problem is, you now have running sewage water on the floor in your house. And there's so many fail safes for that. So we're getting better about looking at stuff like that and learning about that too as well. And I didn't even know about the burst caps. I just thought it was a cap on the sewage cleanout, and how you would find where the septic tank was. Yep. No, and those are all things that they are, but typically like a homeowner will hit it with a weed eater and break it. And so they'll go to the store and they'll buy this cap and they'll glue it on there. Well, the problem is that cap's not supposed to be glued. The other problem is that cap's supposed to be a certain type. It's not supposed to fit on there very secure. It's supposed to allow it to pop off if needed. So we have to check all those things to make sure all those are in place. Insurance companies, don't get me wrong, they'll pay to fix the house. I mean, that's what they're designed for, but you're going to be out of 6 months, 5 months, 4 months fixing and rebuilding a house because of a flood, when it could have been very easily prevented by having the right proper cap. And so typically there's RV caps, the threaded ones. You've seen those, I'm sure, where they thread. Those are the wrong type of caps. Those ones won't pop off. They have to be threaded off. So it's just making sure that things are done correctly. And this industry is really starting to change and shift towards homeowners are wanting to know, hey, what's the right way to do this? And that's what's nice. If we can get people to ask those questions and we can educate them, then we're not going to have midnight calls. Hey, septic's overflowing in the house. They're going to call and say, hey, my cap burst, water's on the ground outside. When can you get here? And we don't have to go at midnight. We can go the following day at 10 because it's not an inside emergency. It's an outside emergency. And that's the whole point is nobody wants to work every single night at midnight, 1 o'clock, trying to fix a problem because water's on the floor. Plumbers want to show up the next day because they have a family and they need sleep too. So we're trying to learn how to do that. So it's working really well now.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about regarding it that I haven't caught or touched on?
People typically ask on inspections, you'll get a lot of customers that will pass on them. And I used to be that way where when we bought our first home, I passed on everything because I didn't want to pay the $200 or the $500 or the $300. Mm-hmm. I would just say, not because I'm in the industry of inspections, but because I recognize there's been a handful of people that were buying homes that they had the money to buy them, but they didn't have the money to fix them. And during our inspection, we noted several major issues with the septic systems. And that seller then had to help negotiate the price of the home and the repairs of those things so that the new person buying the home moving in now moves into a place that's sanitary, a place that will right off the bat work and give them some time to build up, get comfortable in their home before they have a major issue that the failure presents them a huge bill. And so one of the things I'd like to encourage is getting those inspections, those home inspections, your water tests, your well inspection, and your sewer inspection. Those are big inspections. HVAC, getting those inspections. I mean, yeah, they can. Those are important too. But out of all of them, the most important isn't ultimately the septic. The most important is the home. The well and the septic are just as important. So getting those inspections are really, really important. And people typically in the septic industry think, oh, if it's water's going down the pipe, it's okay. We have seen multiple homes that have failures. Basically, the septic system has failed and water still goes down the pipe. And the reason why is because over a period of hours, slow water will transfer into the leach field very slowly. So you run 100 gallons of water in the pipe, it goes down, but if you looked in the tank, it would actually be filling the tank up to the lids and trying to come out, but it couldn't because it's under the soil. So we recommend these inspections are done because you need to know what you're buying, not so that we have more work because we have plenty, but we just need to make sure that we educate new buyers coming into the industry, especially with home prices. The medium of home prices is so much higher now. And if you have a denitrification system for a new service to the home because of requirements the county has put on that area, you're going to be right off the bat moving into a home and $25,000 bill. That's not going to be, and the seller of the home's not necessarily doing anything wrong, and they're not doing anything wrong by passing. It's just something that they need to understand, and we can always in those areas educate them and let them know what they're buying. That way they're not caught off guard and mad at the realtor or mad at the seller because they think that they supposedly hid it from them, which they didn't. They said, hey, system's been working 25 years, haven't had a problem. Well, it's a really good idea. And the other thing is that deterioration. It's really important that we look at the structure of the tank and where it's at. Typically, people will pour patios or driveways and stuff over their tanks, and they just never knew because it works for 25 years and they didn't even know it was there. So those inspections tell you where it's at. So if you ever have an issue, you know right where to go. And we do a nice little map of the property, and we do a little box. And we put that box on the property overhead, and it gives you a very close, very general area of where that tank is at. So that way an inspector or a pumper can show up and you show them the map and you say, hey, Marshall said it was right here. Boom, it's right in that area so they don't have to look for it. And that's really helpful. So yeah, just make sure that we encourage, all realtors need to encourage inspections. There is a cost to it, but it way outweighs not knowing where your stuff's at.
And it's not that bad. And we've changed how we collect it between seller and buyer a lot of times. So I'd rather have them do it because it takes the liability off us. And they can't come back and say, well, you didn't, tell us we should.
And the liability part's really important because you're doing your job by encouraging it. And if they decline it, they sign. I mean, they have to sign declining it, which is fine. That takes the liability away too. But at the end of the day, I have been to numerous houses that they just bought a house, they moved in and it backed up. And typically what that is if a home's sitting vacant, somebody's flushed, waste down the drain,
Or
it
a
dries.
doll or
Yep, or something, right? And it dries in the pipe or it gets lodged in the pipe. They move in within a week. They're already backed up and they're beside themselves. And when we show up with a backed up pipe, it's twice as long to figure out where it's at, because now we have a pipe that's not empty with a camera that we can go to the tank. We have to actually hand dig the pipe or follow it with a probe to find out where that tank's at. So it's much more costly, much more difficult, and it's always in a panic. So it's always a rush to figure out where it's at, because of course water's coming on the floor in the house. So we want to encourage those inspections so everybody knows what they're buying. And there's like a little rule in this industry. When you buy a house, it's almost like there's all these little things that go wrong. And the reason why is we just believe God wants us to know where everything is at. That way we're able to help everybody else. So when every house I've ever bought, I have to crawl it. I got to fix it. I got to find out where it just seems like I have to know where everything's at within the first couple of weeks. So get those inspections. That way you don't have to do that.
right? Because some of those septics you bought a Bobcat for some inspections you've had to do.
Some of them we found 6 feet deep in the ground. They have a basement and the basement has a toilet and the toilet gravities into the tank. And well, if you have a basement, you're already 6 feet lower in the soil, 7 feet down. So that we got to know where this stuff's at, because you can't find it in a hurry for them when they're having a problem. There's just so much more involved. So encourage inspections for multiple different reasons and encourage maintenance so that people are aware. The other issue is lids. The biggest issue in our industry is lids. So lids, to get a lid off that's been on for 25 years, we actually have to drive a metal wedge, which is like a tool that's used for, it's kind of like a spade, like a spade. It's a chisel is what it's called, but it's like a spade shape. And we have to drive that into the edge of the tank where the lid is broke, to break that gap between where it's sealed to the tank and where it's kind of poured separate from the tank. And to get that, sometimes roots will grow in there or dirt over time and moisture and swelling of the tank. We sometimes more than we'd like break these lids trying to get them out. And there's nothing we can do about that. We have to see in that chamber to be able to do the inspection. So we replace a lot of lids, and we have to do custom lids, and we have to do risers on tanks, because that's just, to do an inspection, you have to see in those compartments. And nobody likes it. And realtors really don't like it when they're calling their client, hey, we need to replace the lids. And they're like, well, last 5 times we've had to do the lids, what's going on? Well, it's kind of like a tire. It wears out and you have to replace it. So that's where that methane gas will attack first, is the lid.
Okay.
So I think we've covered everything, I'm pretty sure.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that worked out good. And moving forward in the future, like I said, anybody that has any questions more specific to their property or address or area that they're working in, we'd love to give them any sort of advice towards maintenance or any of that kind of stuff. So if you have anybody that needs some of that, you're welcome to pass our information along to be able to help them.
Do you want to give your phone number?
Yeah, our phone number at our office is 775-427-9603. And that you can reach our office and they can get in touch with me and give me a message so I can reach them in the field. Typically I'll call when I'm driving. I wear a Bluetooth so I can do that, which is nice. So I can communicate with a customer while I'm getting to another job. That way I can do multiple things at once. And our other office line is 428-1208, 775-428-1208. So they can call us there. And we're Marshall Septic Care, in case we didn't cover that part. That way everyone knows who we are. And we're out of Fallon, Nevada. We do offer services to every area of Nevada. We go as far as the Oregon border. We go as far as the Utah border. We've been not towards Vegas. We don't go that far, but we've been Mina. We've been down Pahrump area. So we've gone quite a ways.
You're going to have to expand.
Yep. That's why we say we're joking around about going international.
Uh-huh. Hey, I'll keep giving you business.
I love it. Yeah, no, we want to definitely thank you for your business too as well.
You're welcome. So I suppose you should get to work. Otherwise, your employees will think you're sloughing.
Well, I'm sure I've got a couple calls from them already going, where are you at? So yeah, I work alongside with them. we have 9 employees. We run, multiple trucks every day, whether it's 5 or 6 trucks on the road every day doing work. So they expect me to be there just as much as they expect me to be in other areas doing the same work. So that's why we all work so well together, because I enjoy the work part as much as I like the management part. But it's important that we educate, and they know that by educating, it is going to keep us flowing in the work part of it too, because the more education we do, the more they'll recognize the need, and that's important for them. So we don't want people to be buying a service unless they understand what they're buying and why it's important.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time.
You are more than welcome. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Stay out of those tanks.
Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.